Grid. Adam is already a race winner this year in British GT. And then the safety car, pace car as it is now, leads the field away, ready for our second 30-minute, 22-lap race of the day. They line up like this. Andrew Rackstraw is on pole with Harry Foster lining up second. George Gamble is third, and the race one winner, Will Martin, fourth. So it's the top four. Fifth, Dan Lloyd, and Charles Rainford will go from sixth. Seventh, Matthew Rees ahead of Hugo Ellis, and then Angus Whiteside. James Wallace comes next ahead of Will and then Ross Wiley. Angus Whiteside having been the Pro-Am winner earlier on in the day. Row 7, Oliver ahead of Stephen Jelly, and then Sid Smith. Ollie Jackson is behind him. Then it's Will Burns and Abby Eaton completing row 9. Josh Stanton and Henry Dawes are next ahead of Lee Mole, the winning Am from earlier on in the day. Richard Hosking and William Paul round out the grid, those two having had a coming together at the chicane. So Will Martin, very dominant drive this morning, and Thruxton, perfect circuit for these cars. They can really stretch their legs.
Yeah, this is one of the places where I really wish I was back in a Porsche Carrera Cup. I loved racing these cars round here. Super fast, super delicate control inputs to control the weight of the car moving around the fast parts. A lot of tyre management going on as well. And this was somewhere you really felt like it was down to driver rather than anything else to get the result.
Now George Gamble in the earlier race fell away after about a third of the distance and was under attack from Harry Foster. Will Martin just disappeared up the road. Andrew Rackstraw, the man on pole position, hadn't raced here up until race 1 this morning. He's had a Formula Ford race win in this country. He was in the Castle Combe Championship. Castle Combe not that far away, but a rather different field of circuit. But Andrew Rackstraw, with all of these new circuits, as well as a new car and a new team and a new culture to cope with, is learning fast.
He is, and you know, to come here in a Porsche and be as competitive as he is not an easy task. Although they've had an official test here to get used to it, there's no substitute for knowing the nuances of Thruxton in a powerful car like experience. So he's doing a fine and interesting start to this race.
Just saw Matthew Rees going through the chicane. He was really impressive at Donington in that first race, but has struggled to perhaps maintain the form in that very smart green and black livery in the background, the Team Parker Racing entry that is going to start 7th on the grid. There is William Paul. He is a newcomer to the Am class this weekend. He's done a little bit of modern Porsche racing in endurance racing. He's done a lot of historic racing as well in Porsches, and I think I'm right in saying in a Morgan. And on occasions has shared his cars with Rory Butcher, former touring car racer, former Carrera Cup racer, who is here as a kind of advisor, driver coach role. Right, we're ready to go racing. 22 laps or 30 minutes, depending on which comes first. Round 6 of Porsche Carrera Cup Great Britain. We are ready to go racing then. Andrew Rackstraw on pole position. Harry Foster with him at the front of the grid. The lights go out, it is blast off, and a good getaway by Rackstraw, and a good getaway by Gamble as well. Look up on the inside line to go second, and also squeezing up the curve was Dan Lloyd. He was trying to get himself up to 4th. It didn't work, and Charles Rainford attacks on the outside line and gets ahead of Lloyd as they hit the complex.
No faulting that start from Rackstraw. Absolute blinder. Car shot off. Dan Lloyd had to get out of the throttle there, I think, to avoid contact, and lost the place as a result. Rainford going through on the outside.
And Stephen Jelly there getting in a battle with Ollie Jackson, former touring car racers both. Jelly running out of road and Jackson going back ahead of him. And Gamble is on his toes, isn't he, from the get-go here? Right on the back then of Andrew Rackstraw, the race leader. Look how much effort is having to be put into George Gamble's car, still on pretty cold tyres, hustling it up towards Church.
A great onboard shot there, showing just how much these cars move around as they go round the fast Goodwood corner. Now going through Church for the first time. Gamble gets a good run off through there. Not much of a slipstream, surprisingly, given off by these cars. You'd think they would, but they actually don't give a great slipstream.
Andrew Rackstraw, though, looks like he's going to lead at the end of lap 1, going nicely as he comes into the chicane. Rides the curb, right, left, right again. This is George Gamble's view in second place as he hustles on up towards the line. There's not going to be much between them as they go over the stripe. Indeed, it is .293 of the second. In third place, it is Harry Foster. 4th, Will Martin. Charles Rainford is 5th. Dan Lloyd is 6th. Matt Rees 7th. Hugo Ellis 8th. Then it's Whiteside and James Wallace. Angus Whiteside, the Pro-Am leader, 9th overall.
Yeah, Angus Whiteside in a reshelled car after that awful Brands Hatch roll we saw in the second race there, or the third race of the day, but awful roll he had up at Druids, but the car's been reshelled by the team.
and it's got very useful stickers on it saying "this way up," and there's another one on the back which is placed upside down, and it says, "if you can read this, please flip me over."
Yeah.
Angus upside, I think, rather than white side he was at Brands Hatch. But anyway, he is going nicely, and he had a Pro-Am win earlier on in the day, so he has bounced back, ho-ho. Certainly no ill effects of Brands Hatch. Up front then, Andrew Rackstraw is hanging on to that race lead. George Gamble, with greater Thruxton knowledge, is behind him, but dare one say that on this lap Rackstraw has just extended the lead a bit.
Yeah, it looks like he has by a fraction. Rackstraw has taken advantage of this partial reverse grid. Top 4 for race 1 reverse. Will Martin was winner. He started 4th and remains in 4th. But yeah, Rackstraw taking advantage of that reverse grid.
That's Lee Mole, who missed the Brands Hatch races because he was away racing at the Monaco Historic Grand Prix, as you do.
As you do.
But now back and had an AM win earlier on in the day. Justin Sherwood, remember, took over that car at Brands and was somewhat dominant with the 3 wins. There's the lead battle. So Rackstraw is 6/10 up. Replay of drama going through the chicane. Lots of curb hopping. Lots of two-wheeling. And Ollie Jackson was the one getting in a bit of stride and skipping the chicane. Sid Smith.
Yeah, a bit of a busy time. These cars can't take quite as much curb as the touring cars we saw in the previous race. At the chicane they can, but a lot of other places around the course they just don't take as much curb. The car reacts quite nastily to vicious curbs, so they stay off them.
Ollie Jackson then with that retro Works colour scheme aboard number 48, taking you back to how Works Group C Porsches looked in the early 1980s. There is Henry Dawes at the back of the queue in 20th place ahead of the AMs. He's in the Pro-Am class. Leaders then come up Woodham Hill, and it remains 3rd and 4th Harry Foster and Will Martin, not really being able to make progress. Normally we get really good racing from Carrera Cup here, and here's another good battle. Angus Whiteside 52, James Wallace, the Porsche Junior, on the tail of him, number 50 James Wallace, driving for Nick Tandy's team. Nick away on the Le Mans test day, but James Wallace, like Nick, started his career in mini stocks on the ovals, the ORC style mini stocks, and then went into circuit racing through junior saloons and is adapting nicely to Porsches.
Yeah, that's a Pro-Am driver, Angus Whiteside, leading a pro driver in James Wallace. But yeah, James having his first season in the car. He has the luxury of knowing he's got a 2-year deal there. Porsche Junior for 2 years. And it's interesting to see the progress that drivers make. And Angus Whiteside has made enormous progress from you know, being a midfield runner to a race winner now.
Yeah, he's always been in Pro-Am, hasn't he? His 3rd season in the championship, so the mileage is useful. There is Rackstraw. Now, he led last time by 7/10 of a second, and he is certainly getting away now. If anything, look, George Gamble, like we saw in race 1, falling into the clutches of those behind. And again, it's Harry Foster with whom he fought in the opener.
Yeah, they're definitely catching.
Hugo Ellis there to the outside of Dan Lloyd. Lloyd in the darker liveried car on the outside line. Brands Hatch winner Hugo Ellis into the chicane. Hugo thinks better of it.
Yeah, couldn't quite get the lunge on the brakes that we've seen in touring cars. Hard to do. The Porsches are approaching that chicane at 175 miles an hour. So it's very brave to go around the outside on the brakes.
This is the view from George Gamble's car. He is good on the brakes going into the complex.
Campbell through the left-hander at Cobb. Try and keep the car to the left to maximise your exit speed through Seagrave. Right out to the outside. Up, looks at the gears on his dash. He's into 5th. He'll stay in 5th through here. Just a lift and back on the throttle. Doesn't take 6th. He'll stay in 5th through Goodwood. Nudges it down to 4th to get a bit of extra drive out the corner. Then up to 5th again on the run down to Church. Hopefully he'll take, haven't got to change down for Church. He should be in 5th, definitely. Through here now. Let's see how quickly he can get into 6th gear. Hanging on to that car for grim death as you go through Church. His front bonnet is flapping. That's unusual on these cars.
Harry Foster is the man chasing him. Andrew Rackstraw there, ahead of George Gamble, is the man with the fastest lap of the race to his credit. Gamble out of the chicane now, back on board. See how close they are to those tyre stacks. We've had drama in earlier races with people hitting those at the chicane. Of course, they're moved for the single-seaters, but put back into the way for closed-wheel cars.
Yeah, trust me, if you had to pay the bills for the damage on these Porsches, you wouldn't want to see those tyres in front of you, especially if someone else has knocked them out the way. Dan Lloyd coming into shot there, still ahead of Hugo Ellis. Dan Lloyd with a new sponsor on his car this weekend, Nutrien, helping him out with his racing budget for the year.
Dan Lloyd for David Fairbrother's Toro Verde GT squad, and he's keeping Hugo Ellis for Stuart Parker's Team Parker Racing. A keep at bay, at least for now. These two are in 7th and 8th places as they run up through Goodwood once again. We're currently on lap 6 out of the 22.
Yeah, it'd be nice for Rackstraw to get this win, wouldn't it? Particularly for the team, JTR, as you say, the boss. The boss is away on duty at Le Mans. Nick Tandy driving the Works Porsche, who are obviously back at Le Mans for the 24-hour race, and everyone in this paddock wishes him the very, very best. Going for a 2nd win at Le Mans, remember. He's already been a winner, but he'd be very pleased to hear if his team can pull off a win here at Thruxton.
So Andrew Rackstraw then goes through, and the margin hovering around the 9/10 of the second mark. George Gamble ahead of Harry Foster and then Will Martin, who absolutely dominated the first race but hasn't really been able to make progress in this.
No, he made good progress in race 1, ultimately winning by just over 8 seconds. Yeah. But he hasn't been able to get past even his, I say even, no slouch is Harry Foster, yeah. But he hasn't been able to get past Harry Foster. In fact, Harry Foster is further up the road and closer to Gamble than Martin is to Foster.
Yeah, Will Martin's win in the race earlier today was from pole position. He absolutely nailed the start, drove off into the distance, and as you rightly say, it's harder here. He's not as close to Foster as Foster is to George Gamble. In the AMs, it is Lee Mole ahead of William Paul. In Pro-Am, Angus Whiteside clear of Will Aspin and Oliver White in the silver car that just flicked through the shot. Further back, Stephen Jelly having a really rotten weekend. Stephen is in 17th place, and he's another one that just can't seem to make progress, mysteriously. Yeah, despite having been quite quick in testing here. But a lot of this race is down to tyre management. The teams have 2 brand new sets plus a set for the official test. And it does depend a little bit on how they've used their tyres as to what the best tyres they've got left for this race is. Usually I'll have a quick squint in the assembly area and see who's got new tyres left. At this stage, you'll be lucky if you've got 2 brand new left tyres left. Yes. You've probably got 2 tyres on the left that have previously run on the right-hand side of the car, either in qualifying or race 1. But that can explain sometimes the lap time differential in this second race to race 1. Ross Wiley, number 29, Pro-Am, number 12, Stephen Jelly, Pro. Ross Wiley stays ahead for the moment, but these two are a long way back. They're very accomplished racers, but they're only 16th and 17th. Behind them, Abby Eaton in the blue car, the pale blue car, and then Josh Stanton. And all of those 4 you would anticipate to be higher up the order. Yeah, I think, not sure where they lost so much ground, but they should, you'd expect them to be higher up. They're all with experience. Abby Eaton new to Porsche racing this season, having raced in Lamborghini Super Trofeo Europe last year, and Josh Stanton, who was the dominant AM 2 years ago, there in the red car at the back, benefiting from Adam Wilcox's guidance. Closing. Here, up towards the chicane, Stephen Jelly looks quick, doesn't he? And so does Josh Stanton against Abby Eaton. Ross Wiley, very experienced, tries to defend. Jelly gets up the inside, squeezes through. Good pass. Very good pass indeed. The gap was opened up for him, surprisingly, by Ross Wiley. But maybe Ross Wiley's focusing on his own amateur Pro-Am battle rather than battling with the pro. Here's the move again, Tim. Yeah, look, the door is open and Jelly neatly slots it through. Doesn't quite get the car stopped and over the first curve, but he gets it stopped quickly enough to get a good exit from the chicane. Now, in the meantime, George Gamble, second, still dropping away from Andrew Rackstraw. And as we head towards half distance, it is Harry Foster who is hunting him down. So George Gamble, who drives this Century Motorsport run car, it was good in qualifying to get on the front row for the opening race, but he just doesn't seem to have the race pace of others. No, not at this point, does he? Possibly the race will come back to him in the second half. But all the cars here have to start with a minimum start pressure in the tyres, because they obviously balloon up hugely. The Michelin don't want them starting with too lower tyre pressures for fear of failures and punctures, so they have to start with a minimum tyre pressure and also a maximum camber on the tyres as well. That's dictated by Michelin for safety's sake round here. Unlike the touring cars, they don't have a harder tyre to race on. They race on the regular Michelin control tyre that they use at all circuits in all weathers. So meantime, the car of Andrew Rackstraw continues to lead over a second to the good right now, as George Gamble then hustles on in the sectors. George Gamble fractionally faster in the first than was Andrew Rackstraw. And so Andrew, you can certainly say, is a fast learner, because he has got his head around Thruxton very effectively. Further back, Abby Eaton keeping Josh Stanton at bay.
Lap times have dropped off by about half a second. Rackstraw's own last lap was 8/10 slower than his fastest, but they have already dropped off. They drop off a bit more than they do in a touring car, so there is the possibility of more tyre degradation at the end of the race.
So here they come up towards the chicane once more. And there it is Ross Wiley ahead of Abby Eaton, ahead of Josh Stanton. Now this is a battle for position, not only overall but in class, because these are all in Pro-Am. So Stephen Jelly getting past Ross Wiley meant that he wasn't fighting somebody he didn't need to fight, but equally it took away a cushion protecting him from the class opposition behind. Yeah, but this is a battle for 6th, 7th and 8th in class, isn't it? Not for the actual class win.
No, indeed. Which is still being led by Angus Whiteside in 9th overall.
Way up the road, as Matt Rees there has Dan Lloyd behind him, and this is for 6th and 7th places. So Matthew Rees comes up towards Goodwood now, still being pursued vigorously by Dan Lloyd, who takes a tighter line, does he not, heading towards Church this time around out of Village. And then behind the pair, Hugo Ellis, almost in touch.
Yeah, Lord Dan Lloyd's car looking visibly pretty well hooked up there, wasn't it? It looks like he's got a little bit more grip at this stage than perhaps Matt Rees has. Several of these cars have got these bouncing bonnets just at the front. There's several of them flapping, aren't there? So it's obviously not a car-specific issue. It's common to many of them. To the chicane they come, though. Big lock-up from Whiteside, and that's that's Richard Hosking, I should say, being lapped. Same livery as Charles Rainford, but George Gamble puts a lap on the other CCK Motorsport car. So Richard Hosking getting out of the way. He's the third of the AMs. But look how much closer Gamble is. I think there was possibly a moment's hesitation from Andrew Rackstraw there getting past the back marker, but it certainly allowed the front group to close up, and even Harry Foster and Will Martin are closer. Absolutely right. So yes, in fact the gap was down to just 0.2 of a second when they crossed the line anyway, so perhaps even before they really got up to Hosking. So we'll try and trace where that time went to, but yeah, Rackstraw now, as we head into the second half of the race, needs to push on, doesn't he? Because George Gamble, all of a sudden, as you rightly say, is right there behind him. It's game on. Yeah, and don't forget, your first race win in any series is always the hardest one to pull off, because you're desperate for that checkered flag to come out. You're trying not to make a mistake. You want to get that first win in a series. And whilst Andrew Rackstraw's won many races in other categories, oh, look at that mistake, locking up the right front. He did extremely well to back off the brake a little bit and keep that wheel rotating a little bit, but that was a big lock-up. And this is exactly the sort of mistake that gives George Gamble a bit of an excitement. He thinks he can keep the pressure on, force another mistake, maybe get past, as Rackstraw has to go defensive into turn 1. And behind them is Harry Foster, who is right up with George Gamble. So it's 3 for the lead now. And despite that moment and a big curb whack there, Rackstraw is hanging on to the race lead. We're on lap 13 now. Here is the replay coming up towards the chicane. He locks the brake initially, but just manages to drag the trail brake enough to keep that wheel rolling, so he doesn't make a massive flat spot in one spot, but it'll certainly get his attention next time they get to the braking area at the chicane. So George Gamble then pressing on. He's still on the back of Andrew Rackstraw. They come towards Goodwood, through Village, then Church. And Andrew Rackstraw's big lead, and it was traffic at the chicane. He found Richard Hosking in exactly the wrong place, and that, huge frustration for Andrew Rackstraw. There's just no way he could go. No, nowhere he could go. Richard Hosking probably should have seen the blue flags and let them pass before the chicane, because he was always going to hold them up, so needs to be aware of that. They'll probably lap him again before the end of the race, but that was unfortunate for Rackstraw, our race leader. But he is still the race leader, and although Will Martin has caught up to Harry Foster, Foster's not doing much about Gamble, and the lead gap has stretched out again. It's up to just over 0.4 of a second. So as the leaders hit the complex for the 14th time, Andrew Rackstraw is trying and seemingly succeeding in doing the rebuild of the lead. Yeah, well, that's very good if he can regain his composure and pull that lead out, get back into his rhythm, because he was under pressure and Gamble was really trying to take advantage of that and keep the pressure on. But it looks like, as you say, David, like Rackstraw's sort of weathered that little storm for a lap.
It's an impressive drive, this. Okay, he did have that lock up at the chicane, but other than that, for only his second race around here, he's doing a really good job. There's Hugo Ellis in number 8. Team Parker Racing car with that very creative livery on the left-hand side. Back on board with George Gamble in the first sector of this lap. He was fractionally slower in the second sector. Fractionally slower. We're talking hundreds, though.
Yeah, definitely. That gap's gone out to where it was before the little incident with Richard Hosking at the chicane here. It's more about Gamble protecting his second place from Foster and Martin.
It is now, because that has come right down the Gamble-Foster situation. There's Angus Whiteside just going through shot, who is the Pro-Am leader. Second Pro-Am, it is Will Aspin, and third, Oliver White. There's Angus Whiteside, Pro-Am winner earlier on in the day. He's very much becoming now the benchmark driver in the class. Yeah,
he really is, and on many occasions beating some or all of the pros. So yeah, it's doing. I'd love to see him stay in the championship next year and move up to the pro class, because he more than deserves to be there. With 3 runners in the AM class, Lee Mole, Paul and Hosking, with Lee Mole winning that at the moment.
Angus Whiteside came from the Ginetta GT Academy. There is the leading AM, Lee Mole, who we've seen in the Toka paddock, both as a driver and with his involvement in the 888 team many years ago, and he's been away in historic racing, decided to come back and have a go at modern GT style cars once more. He's for Stuart Parker's team, the London-based driver, and back in the championship, having had Justin Sherwood sub for him very successfully, to the point that Justin was the championship leader in AM coming here, because he'd done 3 races to Lee's 1, but I think that's going to sort itself out after this weekend. So there is Lee Mole heading up towards the complex. Meantime, look at the battle on here. James Wallace coming into the braking zone. Behind him is Will Aspin, and then the silver car is that of Oliver White. These 3 are 10th, 11th and 12th. Over the line they go once more. Sid Smith in the green and white car is behind, running in 13th place overall. And then Will Burns, one-time touring car racer, ahead of 2 more touring car drivers, Ollie Jackson and Stephen Jelly next up. So James Wallace at the moment having to think more about defending than going after Angus Whiteside, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. He's got a good rhythm going, though. Rhythm is so important. These cars are physically hard to drive round here. You're working really hard, you're controlling a fast, heavy car, and you know when you've done a race at the end of one of these, and this is the end of their second race of the day.
Well, there's the leader, Andrew Rackstraw. The gap last time was half a second. In Sector 1, he was quicker than Gamble. In Sector 2, he was quicker than Gamble. Again, only by tiny margins. Down to the chicane they come. And another lock-up from Andrew Rackstraw.
That was a worse one. That was a big one. He's had to go straight line the chicane. He'll have a flat spot on his tyres. He was flashing his lights because there's another back marker ahead of him, and he didn't want a repeat of his incident with Richard Hosking, but it put himself off. He outbraked himself and locked up, and that was a big lock-up.
And he rattled over the curb as well. There is Rackstraw then up towards the complex, so he was able to gather his thoughts once. He's got to do it again. This is how George Gamble saw it. Big lock-up, and eventually, of course, having to straight line the chicane. The race leader, Andrew Rackstraw, that will, as Tim rightly says, done that front tyre a power of no good. He's still on the lights. It is William Paul, I think I'm right in saying, further up the road that he needs to get past in a hurry. But George Gamble, he can't do it on pace, can he? But he might be able to do it on how Rackstraw drives.
Yeah, if Rackstraw makes a mistake or mistimes his overtake, it could give him an opportunity. Trying to get the run before they get to Church. Is he going to get there? Yes, he is, but not on the ideal line. But Gamble is blocked a little bit on the apex as well, but comes out faster.
And then behind them is Harry Foster, William Paul in only his second Porsche race, and his first one didn't last long, keeping out of the way. Down they come to the chicane. What does Rackstraw do this time? He's okay. This will be the end of lap 17. The laps are ticking on down, but equally, first to fourth, well, he can throw a handkerchief over them now. They're much closer than they were earlier on. Rackstraw to Gamble is 0.4 of a second. Then Foster, then Martin. Slightly distant fifth, Charles Rainford, and Matt Rees in sixth place. You're on board with Gamble, you're up to the complex, and you've got less than 5 laps to go.
Right, we need to see if Andrew Rackstraw can regain his composure and pull out that little gap that he did once before when he made a mistake.
Out of Seagrave they come, and up the road next is Lee Mole, the leading AM to be lapped. Lee very experienced, I'm sure he won't get in the way of them, but Andrew Rackstraw wants to be absolutely certain of that, and he's going to encounter that car on the fast part of the circuit. Harry Foster wide to the grass, and this is Will Martin, his teammate, having a go around the outside. Can't do it. The Eden Race Drive twins absolutely together now. Martin with the momentum, and Rackstraw on the lights. Limo gets out of the way. Good man. Gamble dealt the bad blow, isn't he? Because he has to wait till the other side of the corner, really, before he can move ahead of Limo. So that gap has just extended slightly.
Yeah, and with Harry Foster making that little mistake as well, he's dropped back. Is he going to get through on Limo? Limo's just cut across the front of him, so that's going to delay the two Eden race cars. In fact, he gets a bump from Harry Foster in the middle of the corner for holding him up, and is this the chance for Will Martin to get past?
And they've certainly been delayed. They've lost a chunk of time to the top two, 7/10 of a second between Rackstraw and Gamble now, as the leaders head their way up towards the complex once again. But Will Martin, despite the delay that Harry Foster suffered, still can't find a way through. He's all up the curb going into the complex. Even that doesn't help him. Lap 19 now.
Oh, look at the big black line. Harry Foster left there, coming through the middle of the complex as he tried to put the power down. Remember, there's no traction control or ABS on these cars, and they're 520 horsepower, and you saw every bit of it there as he booted it coming through Cobb.
They are mighty beasts, these, and the 4-litre engines love this type of circuit where all that grunt can be unleashed. So Andrew Rackstraw, despite everything that's been thrown at him, is still the race leader from George Gamble. 7/10 of a second was the margin last time. This lap number 19, there is Rackstraw up front then as he comes towards the chicane once more, having been third in the Global Touring Car Championship, as it's dubbed, the South African Series last year. He's been a champion in Formula Ford 1600 back in South Africa, but a very different type of racing, very different circuits over here, and has got a good pedigree back in South Africa, now looking to establish himself in Europe and in GT-style cars. James Wallace has dropped back, look, because Aspin and White have both gone through. Yeah,
they have, but there was a lot of blue smoke in the air there, so someone else had a lock-up going into the chicane.
Over the timing line goes Ollie Jackson, through on the inside. That puts him ahead of William Paul. And James Wallace, we've been talking about losing places. The Porsche Junior, he may have a problem because that car doing a rather slower lap last time around. However, Matt Rees busy battling with Dan Lloyd. This is for 6th. Lloyd has shaken off Hugo Ellis, hasn't he, in turn?
Yeah, he has. I thought Lloyd's car looked good earlier, but he just hasn't been able to find a way. But him and Matt Rees have definitely pulled a little bit of a gap on Hugo Ellis.
Unless Hugo was delayed in the traffic because he's just moved himself past Lee Mole. So I'm not pointing the finger at Lee, but just depending on where you find a slower car, it can make a difference. And Hugo Ellis is now seemingly catching back up. A lot of flapping at the front of Matt Rees's car now, but hopefully that'll survive to the end, which is really under 3 laps to go now. Andrew Rackstraw has just gone across the timing line as this battle comes into the chicane and way up the curve. Matthew Rees.
Yeah, not quite the quickest way, but he gets a good exit. That's all important out of the chicane.
Looks good though.
Yeah, it does look good.
So Rees over the line, he hangs on to 6th ahead of Dan Lloyd, and the lead gap 7/10 between Rackstraw and Gamble. There are 2 laps to go. Angus Whiteside still leads Pro-Am, and the leading Am remains Lee Mole, as now Dan Lloyd tries the outside at Campbell, the inside for Cobb, and this should go in favour of Dan Lloyd on the inside line. Yes, it does. Really good move. Thought about that and worked it to perfection. Yeah,
a bit of touring car experience there, didn't he? He had a good run through turn 1. Feinted to go to the inside, which caused Matt Rees to defend, and he just launched it down the outside. We saw a bit of tyre smoke, but he was able to get cleanly around. Just watch, see the tyre smoke, he's actually locked up a little bit, but he gets enough momentum to get round the outside and up the inside before the left-hander at Cobb, and that's position gain.
Round the outside, place gain, as you say. George Gamble, in the meantime, still looking at the back of Andrew Rackstraw. There's another slower car. Is that Richard Hosking again? Because there's a back marker ahead, and once more, poor old Andrew Rackstraw seems to encounter the slow car in exactly the wrong part of the lap. It is Richard Hosking being lapped for the 2nd time. Rackstraw goes through, Gamble goes through, and this is the last lap.
Yes, I thought they'd lap him again, but yeah, nearly caused the race to have a different outcome. Poor old Andrew Rackstraw has had to put up with a lot in this race, hasn't he?
He deserves
this. Let's see if he can just hang on for the rest of this lap. He does deserve this. He's been under a lot of pressure. He's made the odd mistake, but every time he's managed to regain his composure and put enough distance between himself and George Gamble. So it's been a fine drive by Andrew Rackstraw.
He is half a lap away from the end. Andrew Rackstraw then looking for a maiden Carrera Cup GB win. Not his first win in the UK, having had that Castle Coombe Formula 4 Championship win at the start of May. Look at the way that third and fourth have really fallen away as there Abby Eaton and Josh Stanton get past Lee Mole. They have been nose to tail pretty much race long, and Abby Eaton fending off Josh Stanton. The leaders in the meantime are making the run towards the end of this 22nd lap, and it is going to be, barring a drama at the chicane, Andrew Rackstraw for the win. He will have to slow it down. He does. He doesn't lock up. He's got Gamble close, but not close enough, and then the squirt up towards the timing line. Checker flag at the ready, and after a really busy race, Andrew Rackstraw wins, and he is delighted. Andrew Rackstraw wins at Thruxton, second George Gamble, and third Harry Foster. Angus Whiteside there at the back of this little battle pack. He's going to be the Pro-Am winner once again. He will make his way up towards the line, and Angus Whiteside then takes the third Pro-Am victory as the fourth Pro-Am victory, because he won earlier on in the day. The next train of cars comes through. Lee Mole is going to be the winning Am, but Andrew Rackstraw, well, he had to cope with everything. Pressure, back markers, brake locking, panic, but he came through it all, and a really good win.
Yeah, very good win, and well done Lee Mole for winning the AMS on his return. Well, that will close the championship up a little bit as well, because Will Martin had a 13-point lead over George Gamble, but of course Gamble's finished ahead of him in this race, albeit there are slightly less points for this second race, the reverse grid race, than there are for first, but it will close the championship up. But hats off to Andrew Rackstraw.
Andrew Rackstraw's win in the end was by just over half a second, which doesn't really tell the whole story of that race, but Andrew had a lot thrown at him, and